Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's get right into it. Have you ever found yourself, caught in that weird place where you're doing all the right things, ticking every single box?
The checklist life?
Exactly. The checklist life. Maybe you've even achieved what, everyone around you would call a good life, real success. But then you wake up and there's just this feeling, this profound lack of something,
And
an
a
emptiness.
void, yeah. Despite all the external validation.
Right, and that nagging question, that why.
Mm.
Well, that's exactly what we're plunging into today. We want to get past the surface stuff, the achievements, and uncover what really drives us, or maybe what should be driving us.
It's such a common feeling, that sense of misalignment. And what I find really insightful about our source material today is how it maps out this journey. It actually starts with a very, very honest personal confession about feeling unfulfilled.
Wow.
Yeah, and from that personal starting point, it just meticulously breaks down the biological reasons, even the sociological ones, for why understanding our why isn't just some nice-to-have philosophical idea. It's actually crucial.
Crucial how?
For everything, really. Our personal well-being, how we
Mhm.
approach our work, how we build relationships that actually mean something. It pushes way beyond just knowing what we do or even how we do it.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is, well, it's to pull out the surprising facts, the really deep insights. We want to help you understand why it's so important to line up your decisions, big and small, with your actual purpose.
Which ideally leads to better relationships
Right.
and a more fulfilling life overall.
Exactly. We're going to peel back those layers and see how this fundamental why really touches every single part of our lives. So, at the heart of this whole deep dive is this core idea. It sounds simple on the surface, but it's actually quite profound. The source argues that pretty much everyone knows what they do.
Right, your job title, your role,
Yeah.
parent, engineer, artist,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. And, a lot of us also know how we do it. We know our process, our skills, what makes us, special or effective. Maybe you're super analytical or really good with people or a great communicator.
Your unique selling proposition, so to speak.
Exactly. But here's the kicker, the part we often miss. Very, very few people can clearly articulate why they do it. And not just, to make money or to climb the ladder.
No, the deeper thing. The purpose, the cause, the belief that fuels it all.
Right. And the source makes this really clear point. When you make decisions, even small daily ones, that aren't lined up with that core why, it leads to this deep discomfort, this feeling of, well, like you don't really know yourself, that void we talked about.
Almost like wearing clothes that just don't fit right, isn't it? You can look successful on the outside, check all the boxes society gives you.
Yeah, got the degree, got the job, got the house.
But if those choices aren't anchored in your why,
Yeah.
it feels off.
Yeah.
Deeply unsettling.
It really does. And the source, you mentioned it, it starts with a personal story.
It does. And it's incredibly powerful because it's so relatable, even if people don't talk about it openly. It describes this person who, by all standard measures, had a great life, built their own business, making good money.
Living the dream, right?
Supposedly, good clients, proud of the work they were doing. But despite all that outward success, something shifted. The passion just evaporated. Waking up and facing the workday became something they genuinely dreaded.
Wow, that's tough.
It is. And it wasn't just a bad week. It was this deep, constant internal struggle, a real weariness. And the worst part, according to the source, was the shame that came with it.
Shame. Why shame?
Because everything looked perfect. So admitting this internal emptiness felt like admitting failure, which meant they spent a huge amount of energy just pretending to be happy, pretending to be successful, pretending everything was fine.
Oh man, that sounds exhausting.
Incredibly draining is how the source puts it. Like this constant performance. And maybe you listening have felt that pressure too.
Yeah.
To put on that everything's fine mask, even when it's really not. It makes you wonder, how much energy are you spending just keeping up appearances?
That's a heavy thought. So what happened in the story? Was there a turning point?
Yes, a really crucial moment. A moment of catharsis, actually. It came when a very close friend, someone who really knew them, noticed something was off, saw through the act.
Ah, so someone called him out gently?
Gently, yeah, but persistently.
Yeah.
Offered that opening. And that safe space allowed for a totally honest confession. The person just let it all out. All the anxiety, the shame, the feeling of being lost.
And the relief must have been immense.
Like a literal heavyweight lifted, is how they described it. The isolation, the secrecy, it just ended. And here's the really interesting part. All that energy that was going into lying, hiding, faking it, suddenly it was free. It wasn't just gone. It was available, like opening floodgates.
Hmm.
And that freed up energy could finally be used to actually find a solution, to build something real.
Wow. It just shows the power of vulnerability, doesn't it? Taking off the mask.
It absolutely does. You don't
Yeah.
just feel lighter.
Huh.
You create this vital space for actual self-discovery, for real progress.
So this personal journey leads to a broader insight.
Exactly. The source connects this personal story to a really profound point. Often, we only truly understand the importance of our why when we lose it. When that drive disappears, when the joy goes, that's when we realize how critical it was all along.
It's like you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Precisely. This person knew what they did well, they knew how they were unique, but they couldn't answer why they were getting out of bed to do it anymore. Maybe they'd offer a generic answer like, oh, I want to be my own boss.
Yeah, the standard entrepreneur line.
Right. But the source argues that's not a real deep reason. It doesn't inspire you day after day. The discovery of their true why came from understanding the biology of how we make decisions.
Biology, how does that work?
Well, our source explains the what and how parts. Those are processed in the neocortex, the logical, analytical part of our brain that handles language.
Okay.
But the why, our purpose, our beliefs, our core values, that resonates in the limbic system. That's the part that handles feelings, trust, loyalty, all human behavior.
Mm.
Critically, it has no capacity for language.
So we feel the why more than we can articulate it.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
feel it deeply, even if we struggle to put it into words. And if that why isn't clear, if it's not rooted in that limbic system, then all the logical whats and hows won't create true purpose or loyalty. They might make sense on paper.
But they don't like that fire.
Precisely. They don't inspire action or deep connection. So thinking about this, maybe a good question for you listening is, have you ever had one of those moments, a time of real unfulfillment that kind of forced you to dig deep and ask, what is my why?
That biological link really drives home why. Just knowing the what and how isn't enough for that deep satisfaction. And building on that, the source makes this really strong claim about what a true why actually looks like.
Yeah, it argues that a real purpose, a real why, is always positive. It's always striving for something good.
Like building something, creating, advancing a cause.
Exactly. Rather than just being against something or trying to stop something bad from happening, even if, say, your why was sparked by something difficult, like childhood bullying.
Right, a negative experience.
The purpose that grows from that is always positive and outward looking. Like, I want to create places where kids feel safe, or I want to build communities where everyone belongs. The pain might be the seed, but the flower is always about contribution.
Okay, that makes sense. The focus shifts from the past pain to a future possibility.
Precisely. And this leads directly into a major critique in the source material. The danger, the real peril of setting purely selfish goals.
Selfish goals, like what?
Think about elite athletes. The source gives these really powerful, kind of heartbreaking examples. Michael Phelps, Andre Agassi.
Legends in their sports.
Absolutely. They reached the absolute peak, achieved their lifelong goal, be the best swimmer, be the best tennis player. And what happened right after they hit that pinnacle?
I remember reading about that. Depression.
Profound depression, yeah. And it's not just them. The source points to a pattern. Broadway actors who finally make it to the big stage, executives who hit their million-dollar target, only to feel empty, lost, like, what now?
Why does that happen? You'd think achieving your biggest dream would be pure joy.
You would. But the source explains it's because their entire lives, often since they were kids, were built around a finite goal, a finish line.
Okay, something with a clear endpoint.
Exactly. And every decision, every relationship was basically filtered through, does this help me reach my goal? Relationships often became transactional.
Like, what can you do for me?
Pretty much. If someone couldn't help them get that medal or hit that target, they were often sidelined. And the source is really blunt about the common narrative athletes give, I did it to inspire the kids. It calls that, and I'm quoting here, bullshit.
Wow, strong words.
Very. It points out that their vision boards weren't covered in pictures of kids. They were covered in medals, podiums, money. Inspiring others might have been a nice side effect, a lucky strike extra, but it wasn't the core driver.
So when the finite goal is reached or they can't compete anymore.
Poof, the purpose vanishes. And they often find themselves with very few genuine relationships that weren't tied to that now finished ambition. There's just this huge void.
That's a bleak picture. So what's the alternative the source proposes?
The alternative is profound. It argues that true, lasting joy, real fulfillment, a sense of purpose that doesn't just disappear.
Yeah.
It comes from our ability to serve another human being.
Serve others. How does that work?
Think about the most powerful human experiences. Having a child, falling deeply in love. The Source uses these examples. Suddenly, the sacrifices you make, sleepless nights, putting someone else's needs first, they feel completely worth it. Why?
Because it's not just about you anymore.
Exactly. The effort isn't for your own gain, it's for something bigger than yourself. And what's fascinating is how the Source describes these acts of service as infinite,
Infinite versus finite goals. Okay.
right? Winning a medal is finite. Making a million is finite. But serving others, contributing to their well-being, that doesn't have an endpoint. It keeps going, evolving, often living on, even after we're gone. It's a continuous wellspring of purpose.
So personal achievement is okay, but it needs to be part of something larger.
That's the idea. For it to truly sustain you, it needs to be nested within service, within contribution to others.
That distinction between finite and infinite goals really changes things.
It's absolutely critical for understanding motivation. The Source contrasts individual sports, where you see more of this post-achievement depression, with team sports.
Why the difference?
In team sports, the effort is shared. The purpose is often about the team's success, the we, not just the me. So when retirement comes, there's often less of that personal void. And there's this amazing anecdote about Curtis Martin, the NFL Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah. What's his story?
He didn't start playing football to be a star. He grew up in a really tough neighborhood, and he started playing basically to stay out of trouble, as a favor to his mom.
Okay, so not driven by glory.
Not at all. But then he realized he was incredibly talented, and he had this huge realization. Being great at football could give him a platform to give back later. His why completely shifted.
From just staying out of trouble to service.
Exactly. It wasn't just about being the best running back or making money. It was about building something that would let him make a real difference in his community after his football career was over.
So he saw his career as a means to a larger, infinite end.
Precisely. He saw his life as a continuum, not just one finite event. His NFL career was just a step one in a bigger purpose of service. That's why he wasn't lost when he retired. He knew what came next because his why was infinite.
That is powerful. It really makes you think about your own goals, doesn't it? Are they these sort of arbitrary goals, these finite things?
Like the classic six-pack for summer.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. It's finite. Summer ends where you hit the goal and boom, motivation often disappears. You get into that cycle of getting fit, then falling off.
Because the driver was temporary.
Right. But contrast that with wanting to be healthy for others, for your partner, so you can have decades of active life together, for your kids, so you can be energetic and present for them.
That shifts everything. It becomes about service, connection, a lifelong commitment.
A joyful, sustainable drive. So the question becomes, how can shifting your view from just personal gain to serving others really change your motivation, your habits, your whole sense of well-being? It's definitely something to chew on. Okay, so we've talked about the why and the shift to service. Now, the Source brings in another key piece, the difference between self-improvement and self-awareness.
Yes, this is crucial. We all try to improve ourselves, right? Get better skills, be healthier.
But self-awareness, that's about seeing ourselves clearly, including the stuff we don't want to see.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our blind spots, those things about our behavior or impact that we just cannot see on our own, no matter how smart or introspective we think we are.
And the Source gives a personal example of this.
A really striking one. The speaker was told by a partner, "You're a bad listener." And their first reaction was pure defensiveness. Like, excuse me, listening is my job. I'm an expert.
Yeah, I can imagine that reaction.
But later, after reflecting and actually taking a listening class, they had this painful realization. They were a brilliant listener. With strangers, taking notes, fully engaged.
Yeah.
But with their closest friends, their family, they were, and this is their word, appalling, interrupting, distracted, just not truly present. A massive blind spot.
Wow. That takes courage to admit.
It does. And the Source suggests that often true awareness only dawns after what it calls a punch-in-the-face moment.
Like a wake-up call.
Yeah, a painful breakup, a health scare, like a heart attack, something that forces you to confront reality. But the deeper insight here is that becoming a better listener or getting healthier isn't just self-improvement for you. It's fundamentally an act of service to others.
How so?
It allows you to show up better for them, to be more present, more supportive, more compassionate in their lives.
That makes sense. Your improvement benefits the relationship.
Exactly. And this whole idea of facing uncomfortable truths leads straight into the concept of vulnerability.
Ah, vulnerability. That word gets thrown around a lot these days.
It does. And the source has a pretty sharp critique of how it's often misunderstood today. It talks about vulnerability as broadcast,
What does that mean?
like someone crying alone on social media, hashtagging it, hashtag vulnerable. The source argues there's actually nothing truly vulnerable about that. There's no real risk, no courage required in that specific act.
Okay. So what is true vulnerability then?
True vulnerability is hard. It takes real courage. It means facing the person you need to talk to directly, looking them in the eye and having that difficult, awkward, maybe painful conversation.
Instead of texting or ghosting.
Precisely. Not hiding behind a screen or just disappearing. And here's the key point. The reason to cultivate that true vulnerability isn't just for your own liberation, though that happens. It's primarily a service to others
But service.
because
Oh.
it forces you out of your comfort zone, away from the easy broadcast method, and into the harder direct engagement that actually builds trust and allows for real resolution and connection. It honors the other person.
That's a really different way of looking at it. It's not about broadcasting your feelings, it's about courageous interaction.
Exactly. And it ties into another great anecdote about a yoga instructor who'd say, yoga helps me be present, but then they'd be glued to their phone during meetings.
Right. The walk doesn't match the talk.
Exactly. The source stresses you don't get to decide you're present or a good listener. Those are accolades assigned by others based on their actual experience of you.
So perception is reality in that sense.
In terms of social connection, absolutely. And this even connects to something like meditation. The focus you learn isn't just for your own inner peace. Its highest use is being truly present for a friend who's struggling, pushing your own mental chatter aside to really hear them. That's how you become present for another.
Wow. Okay, so what does all this mean practically? For our lives, our careers, we can't just magically become self-aware and vulnerable overnight.
No, and the source emphasizes we absolutely need relationships and feedback for that growth. It states very clearly, we cannot do this thing called career or life alone. We're social creatures,
Yeah.
tribal. We need each other.
To watch our backs, offer perspective, tell us when we're messing up.
Exactly. To point out those blind spots we can't see ourselves. It's not just about reading books. It's about letting people in, letting them help you see yourself more clearly.
And the source has this counterintuitive idea about trust, right?
Yeah, this is fascinating. We usually think we build trust by offering help. But the source argues we build deeper trust by having the courage to ask for help.
Asking for help builds trust. How?
Because asking is vulnerable. It shows humility.
Right.
And crucially, it gives the other person the chance to experience the joy of sacrifice, the good feeling of contributing to someone else's well-being. It lets them feel needed and valued.
So refusing help can actually be selfish.
In a way, yes, because you're denying someone that opportunity to give, to connect through service. Even not accepting a compliment graciously can be seen that way. You're refusing a gift. It's all about that reciprocal flow.
Okay, that's a lot to think about for personal relationships. How does this apply in a work context? In teams or organizations?
The source gives some really concrete, practical examples of how to build this culture of feedback and vulnerability at work. One is super simple, how you react to feedback.
Okay.
If someone gives you tough criticism and you get defensive or deny it, you've just shut down honesty. Not just from them, but from anyone watching.
You've made it unsafe.
Exactly. But if you genuinely say thank you, even if it stings, you signal that you're open to growth, that their courage is valued. That creates a totally different environment.
That makes sense. What else?
There's a powerful example from the Army Rangers. They had this issue with Spotlight Rangers, guys who were amazing when the bosses were watching, but kind of jerky when they weren't.
Ah, the performer.
Right. So decades ago, the Rangers introduced a system where advancement wasn't just based on performance and instructor reviews. It also required peer review, weighted equally.
So your teammates had to vouch for you.
Essentially, yes. You couldn't advance if your peers didn't think you were a good team player, supportive, reliable. It forced people to be good humans, not just good soldiers.
Wow. That would certainly change behavior.
Absolutely. And then there's this detailed 360-degree review process the source describes for organizations.
How does that work?
Okay, first, you list your own top 3 weaknesses or growth areas with specific examples, and your top 3 strengths, again with examples. Then, in a group setting, you read your weaknesses aloud.
Okay, that's vulnerable already.
It is. Then the group adds to your list. They offer their observations of your weaknesses, always with specific examples. And the only thing you, the recipient, are allowed to say is,
Thank you.
thank you. You're told beforehand, this is a gift. If it makes you mad or defensive, it's probably true.
Oof, that sounds intense, but powerful.
Incredibly powerful. It creates safety for honesty. People often get emotional, have breakthroughs, because they're finally hearing truths about blind spots. And importantly, they also hear about strengths and positive impacts they had no idea they were having.
So it's about seeing the whole picture, warts and all. What about leaders? They often seem insulated from this kind of feedback.
The source calls this the tree of monkeys phenomena.
Yeah.
Leaders at the top look down and see smiling faces from their direct reports.
Everything looks good from up there.
Right. But the people lower down, looking up, see all the, well, the less flattering parts of the leaders above them. They see the problems, the real behaviors.
So good leaders need to recognize they might not be getting the full story.
Exactly. They need trusted sources, maybe informal spies, who will tell them the unvarnished truth. And crucially, they need to swap judgment for curiosity.
Instead of labeling someone lazy.
Ask why. Is there something going on at home? Are they mismatched for the role? Is there a conflict? Shifting from judgment, you're a problem, to curiosity, what's causing this problem, changes everything. It fosters support, empathy, and actual problem solving.
This leads naturally into honesty, doesn't it? The source takes a strong stance on lying.
A very strong stance, especially how it starts small and spreads. The example given is the boss telling their assistant, tell them I'm not here for an inconvenient call.
Seems harmless, maybe.
That's the danger. That small act sanctions lying. The assistant sees it's okay. They start telling small lies. Suddenly you've got this subtle culture of dishonesty creeping through the whole place, eroding trust bit by bit.
It's insidious.
Totally. The source even throws out this challenge. Try not telling a single lie, not even a white lie, for 48 hours. It's incredibly hard. It shows how ingrained minor untruths are.
So it's not about being brutally honest all the time.
No, it's about being truthful. And sometimes, as the source points out with an anecdote about critiquing a bad play, it's about timing that truth. Give the feedback the next day, not right after the show when emotions are high. Be truthful, but be kind and considerate about delivery.
Truth delivered with empathy.
That's the goal, because the long-term impact of a culture of lying, whether at work or home, is just devastating.
How so?
The source talks about ethical fading. This is where people and organizations slowly start making unethical, but maybe still legal, decisions, while convincing themselves they're still ethical. It's a gradual slide.
Driven by pressure, short-term goals.
Often, yes. An excessive focus on numbers, hitting targets at all costs. And it's helped along by things like rationalization. Everyone does it, the boss wants it.
The slippery slope idea. Small lies lead to bigger ones.
Exactly. And the use of euphemisms. Calling torture enhanced interrogation, or spying data mining, or environmental damage managing externalities. It sanitizes the reality.
Creates distance.
Creates distance, makes it easier to stomach. The result, awful places to work, high stress, no trust, cynicism. And that stress doesn't stay at work, does it?
No, it comes home. Affects health, family.
Absolutely. And the source draws a direct line to romantic relationships, too. Little white lies pile up, create misalignment, resentment. You end up living in a false reality. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to get back to truth.
This seems connected to something else the source mentions, conflict avoidance, especially in younger generations.
Yes, it highlights this trend, like quitting a job instead of having the tough conversation about a raise, or ghosting a partner instead of having an honest breakup talk.
Avoiding the discomfort.
Right, but the source argues that this avoidance, while protecting the self from discomfort, actually inflicts trauma on the other person. It leaves them hanging, confused, without closure. It's a profound disservice.
So the takeaway is we need to learn these skills.
Unequivocally. The source argues that teaching skills like how to have uncomfortable conversations, how to give and receive feedback gracefully, how to truly listen, these are far more valuable life skills than, say, trigonometry.
Yeah, you use them every single day.
They are foundational for navigating life, relationships, work, everything, and often completely overlooked. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the post-COVID world. The source offers some really timely thoughts on remote work and connection.
Yeah, that's a huge topic right now.
Definitely. It acknowledges the data rising loneliness, depression, anxiety, and connects it to less in-person interaction, especially for younger folks who maybe got their main social fix at the office.
So the office wasn't just about work for them.
Not just work, no. It was connection, mentorship, learning by osmosis. And the source uses this great analogy. When the internet arrived, people predicted the death of physical stores.
Right, but that didn't happen. They just changed.
Exactly. They became more about experience community.
Mm.
And the source argues remote work isn't the death of the office either. It's a transformation.
So flexibility is here to stay, but the office still has a role.
A different, but maybe even more crucial role. As a hub for connection, for culture building, for collaboration, for mentorship, all the human stuff that's harder to do well purely online, a hybrid future seems likely, with the office as an anchor for those essential bonds.
Interesting. And what about the Great Resignation? The source has a take on that, too.
Oh yeah, a really interesting one. It argues it wasn't just about government stimulus checks or people suddenly chasing dreams.
No, those were factors.
Sure, factors.
Yeah.
But the source frames it as a massive indictment of decades of mediocre corporate culture and weak leadership.
Wow. How so?
Think about it. Before COVID, lots of people, especially frontline workers, put up with jobs that were just fine. Maybe not great, maybe even bad. But the fear of leaving, the unknown, was scarier. Leaders could get away with minimum effort on culture.
Inertia kept people in place.
Right. Then COVID hit. People faced massive uncertainty, layoffs, fear, but they got through it. Suddenly, the unknown wasn't quite so terrifying anymore. They'd survived it.
So if their job was just fine or worse.
They now had the courage to leave, to demand better, or just wait for something that actually aligned with their values. The balance of fear shifted.
So what's the lesson for companies now? And for us as employees or leaders?
The companies that will thrive are the ones that get this. They'll invest in human skills, build real bonds, create cultures where people feel they belong, where they're willing to sacrifice not for perks, but for the mission, for their tribe, for a shared purpose.
Which leads to that mistake companies make, confusing perks with culture.
Exactly. The source calls it confusing trappings for true culture. You see companies bragging about happiness teams, free therapy, flexible work.
All good things, surely.
Good amenities, yes. But post-COVID, everyone started offering similar stuff. Those unique perks vanished. And employees realized, hey, I can work from home in my boxers for this company or for that company that pays me way more.
Ah, so the perks weren't enough to keep them if the pay or purpose wasn't there?
Precisely. Things like slides, free food, fancy offices, they're fun. They make the environment nice, but they are not the why. They're trappings. They won't create loyalty if a better offer comes along.
So you can't just ask people what perks they want and call it culture.
No. The source is emphatic. You have to offer them a cause to join. You need a compelling why that makes people want to belong, to contribute to something bigger.
Like the Apple example the source uses, Steve Jobs.
Perfect example.
Nice.
Jobs didn't do surveys asking what features people wanted.
Yeah.
He had a cause.
Yeah.
Empower individuals through technology. Revolutionize computing, music, phones.
And the products were just the way to do that.
Exactly. People joined Apple not just for a salary, but to be part of that revolution. They work insane hours, poured their hearts out, because they believed in the why.
They sacrificed for the purpose.
Yes. Which brings us back to that key distinction. Working hard for something you love that's passion, fueled by purpose. Working just as hard for something you don't love that's stress. The effort might be the same, but the feeling, the outcome, is totally different.
Purpose makes the sacrifice meaningful.
Just like love or raising kids, it provides that deep, infinite reason that makes the hard work feel not just tolerable, but fulfilling. It's the why, turning effort into devotion. And that idea of purpose extending beyond just you or your immediate goals ties into this concept of the infinite game.
The infinite game. What does that mean exactly?
It means viewing life or work or your purpose not as a game with winners and losers and a final whistle, but as a game where the goal is simply to keep playing, to keep advancing the cause, building something that lasts beyond you.
So it's not about winning, but about continuing, adapting.
Exactly. Focusing on the long-term impact, not just short-term wins. And the person behind our source material actually applies this to his own podcast.
Oh,
He says the goal isn't just being number one on the charts that's finite, it comes and goes. His infinite purpose is to tell the truth, share insights, so others can be honest with themselves and find their why.
So the impact is the measure, not the ranking.
Precisely. The metrics matter for trends, sure, but they don't validate the core purpose, which is the ongoing act of truth-telling and inspiring others. It's about being part of that continuous journey.
And he articulates his own why and just cause.
Very clearly, his why is to inspire people to do the things that inspire them, so each of us can change our world for the better.
That's powerful. And his just cause.
That's the long-term vision, the mountain he's climbing, to create a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired to go to work, feel safe wherever they are, and end the day fulfilled by the work that they do.
Wow. That's a huge vision, but incredibly inspiring.
It really is. And it shows how a personal why can fuel this lifelong, infinite game of contribution, providing endless energy for a cause you deeply believe in.
So how does he put this into action? What does that look like day to day?
Well, he talks about several concrete initiatives. He started his own publishing imprint, Optimism Press, specifically to share ideas that advance that cause.
Okay, using publishing as a tool for the cause.
Right. He's also doing a lot of intense behind-the-scenes work on big issues like police reform learning, contributing his perspective on behavior and systems.
Tackling complex problems.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And working on driving innovation within large, often resistant bureaucracies, trying to foster change from the inside. And maybe most significantly, he's actively mentoring young, infinite-minded CEOs.
Helping them build different kinds of companies.
Exactly. Companies designed to outlast them, to thrive even if everyone left, by rejecting old models like pure shareholder focus and building instead on purpose, resilience, and valuing people. He's really putting his money where his mouth is, trying to build that next generation of business.
That's really living the infinite game. What about his own challenges? Does he talk about insecurities? The source mentioned a dark side.
He does, very openly, which is refreshing. Despite being seen as this brilliant thinker, he strongly rejects labels like genius. He says he actually struggles with complex concepts.
Really? That's surprising.
Yeah, he talks about having ADHD, joking he's written more books than he's read, because reading long, complex texts is hard for him. He used to hide it, felt insecure,
Understandable.
but now he realizes being honest about his struggles helps others who face similar challenges. It makes them feel less alone. And he believes his perceived brilliance, his ability to simplify complex ideas, comes directly from that struggle,
How so?
because he has to ask tons and tons of questions to understand something himself. He keeps digging until it's simple enough for him to grasp, and once he gets it, he can explain it clearly to others.
So his weakness became his strength.
In a very real way, yes.
Mm-hmm.
His ability to hold attention, tell stories, simplify wisdom, it's partly born from his own learning process and his willingness now to be open about it.
That honesty is powerful.
Yeah.
So how does he view success then? What's a life worth living for him?
It's not about looking back at achievements. His happiness comes from being involved in solving ongoing problems, police reform, reinventing business, contributing to the momentum.
The infinite game again.
Yeah.
It's about the process, the contribution.
Exactly. His ultimate joy, he says, will be knowing that his work, his cause, is so clear and compelling, and the tools he leaves behind are so useful that others will pick them up and continue the game without him.
So his legacy is the continuation of the cause.
That's how he'll know he lived a life worth living. By creating something with a purpose and impact that vastly outlives him, moving towards that vision of an inspired, safe, and fulfilled world. Hashtag tag 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 outro.
So after all that, what does this deep dive really mean for you? We've unpacked the incredible power of knowing your why, haven't we? And the freedom, the real joy that comes from shifting focus towards serving others.
And how these ideas aren't just philosophical fluff. They can genuinely transform your relationships, your work, your whole life.
Yeah, it's about getting past those, shiny but ultimately finite goals, the superficial stuff, and tapping into that deeper wellspring of purpose that makes the effort feel meaningful, inspired even.
Which really leads to a question for you to sit with, maybe explore a bit. Where in your life, your job, your family, your health, your community, could shifting from a purely personal finite goal towards an infinite, service-driven purpose unlock more joy, more fulfillment, more engagement?
Where are you spending energy just keeping up appearances, maybe?
Mhm.
Or chasing something that won't ultimately satisfy? And where could that energy be redirected to make a real contribution?
It's worth considering.
And maybe here's a final thought, something provocative to leave you with. What if the biggest, bravest sacrifice isn't giving up something material, but sacrificing that comfortable illusion that we can, or should, do everything ourselves?
That illusion of self-sufficiency.
Right. What if we embraced the messier, more complicated, but ultimately much richer reality of interdependence, of service, both given and received? What if your greatest strength actually lies in letting others serve you through their honest feedback, their support, their willingness to help you see the things you just can't see?